Imagine yourself concealed behind a grand marble pillar in the Vatican's hallowed sanctuaries, where the atmosphere is dense with the aroma of incense and an undercurrent of forbidden allure. It is the year 1501, and amid the wavering shadows thrown by ornate candelabras, you behold a scene that defies the sanctity of these walls. The whisper of silk gliding over your pulse quickens as the realization dawns. You are on the verge of uncovering the most infamous night in the annals of papal history, an orgy of such profound excess that it would eclipse the debaucheries of ancient Rome in its audacity. The crisp October breeze wafts the fragrance of roasted chestnuts into the Vatican apartments, yet this evening, these simple delicacies will serve as instruments in a spectacle destined to indelibly tarnish the Catholic Church's legacy. Within the opulent quarters of Cesare Borgia, son of Pope Alexander VI, 50 courtesans ready themselves for a gathering that will be immortalized in the most clandestine chronicles of Renaissance Rome, safeguarded in the Vatican's archives like a heretical secret entombed amid volumes of devout supplications. Before we delve into these shadowed tales of endurance and moral peril, if you find fascination in unveiling history's concealed realities, I invite you to express your appreciation by engaging with this content and subscribing for further explorations. Kindly share in the comments the location from which you join us. It is truly remarkable how we converge from across the globe. The figure who would earn the infamous title of the most debauched pope was born Rodrigo de Borja y Doms on the 1st of January 1431 AD. In the modest Spanish locale of Zativa, near Valencia. The sun-baked paths of his youth imprinted upon his early recollections, but fate would propel. His uncle, Alfonso de Borgia, had ascended the ranks of the church hierarchy, and upon his election as Pope Calixtus III in 1455 AD, young Rodrigo's path was irrevocably charted, much like a seal impressed upon a sacred decree. At the age of 20, this ambitious Spaniard descended upon Rome with an insatiable gaze and a fervor for advancement that ignited his spirit, poised to seize every prospect the eternal city presented. Rome in the waning years of the 15th century was a tapestry of profound paradoxes, evoking the infernal visions that might have stirred Dante's soul. By daylight, devout pilgrims prostrated themselves before ornate altars, their invocations, yet, under the cloak of night, those same Rodrigo Borgia navigated this labyrinth with unparalleled acumen, amassing fortunes with the calculated intricacy of a weaver crafting an inescapable net. He gathered ecclesiastical benefices from across Europe like a trader accumulating rare gems. His existence mirrored that of a Renaissance sovereign rather than a servant of the cloth. Sumptuous feasts, grandiose residences, and a lineage of paramours who gifted him offspring with the predictability of recurring seasons. The most enduring of these liaisons was with Vanozza de Catanei, a Roman noblewoman whose allure was rivaled only by her savvy in maneuvering the perilous currents of Vatican intrigue. From 1474 to 1482 AD, she bore him 4 progeny who would emerge as pivotal actors in the somber saga about to transpire: Juan, Cesare, Lucrezia, and Jo. Each child symbolized a strategic element in Rodrigo's elaborate scheme of dominion, their destinies offered upon the sacrificial pyre of their patriarch's insatiable aspirations. Even in his cardinalate, Rodrigo's conduct provoked outrage in Rome, a remarkable achievement in a metropolis where impropriety was as commonplace as daily sustenance. Pope Pius II dispatched a vehement missive in 1460 AD, denouncing actions in Siena that had appalled the populace and the curia alike. Yet, contrition was an indulgence Rodrigo eschewed. He pursued the papacy with unyielding resolve, viewing ethical qualms as barriers to some. The conclave of August 1492 transpired like a meticulously orchestrated ritual of venality. Secluded within the Sistine Chapel, beneath the vault that would later bear Michelangelo's transcendent artistry, 23 cardinals convened to select Christ's successor. Precious metals exchanged palms with effortless grace, vows were murmured like solemn orisons, and privileges were allotted like sacramental hope. As the symbolic smoke dissipated on the 11th of August 1492, Rodrigo Borgia ascended as Pope. The Roman citizenry, unexpectedly jubilant, had acclimated to their Iberian cardinal, and foresaw a reign of splendor and vitality. Bonfires blazed upon the 7 hills, torchlit parades snaked through venerable thoroughfares, and arches of victory ascended like materialized benedictions in masonry and timber. Alexander's coronation at St. Peter's Basilica on the 26th of Alexander VI inaugurated his tenure with initiatives that hinted at renewal. He quelled the anarchy plaguing Rome's streets, where more than 200 slayings had marred the months preceding his elevation. He delineated for a fleeting interval. It appeared that celestial guidance had enthroned a worthy guardian upon St. Peter's seat. However, authority, akin to fine vintage, unveiled. Cesare, at a mere 18, was granted the esteemed Archbishopric of Valencia and subsequently advanced to cardinal roles he regarded as mere footholds rather than hallowed vocations. The papal residences under Alexander evolved into a venue where the holy and the worldly engaged in a grotesque pas de deux. Suppers lingered into the small hours, enlivened by diversions that transgressed the limits of propriety, even for the Renaissance epoch. Alexander's consort, her visibility served as an incessant testament that the pontiff's vows of chastity had been crushed beneath the weight of terrestrial yearnings. Johann Burchard entered this realm of dissonances as a scrupulous chronicler, equipped with ink and an indelible recollection. Born circa 1450 inches Niederhaslach, Alsace, commencing in 1483 AD under Pope Sixtus IV, Burchard compiled his Liber Notarum, a comprehensive journal that chronicled both the grandiose rituals and the ignominious deeds of 5 pontiffs. Burchard was no embellisher. He embodied the meticulousness of a ledger keeper and the acuity of a judicial recorder. His entry, the master of ceremonies, held a singular niche in the papal order, elevated sufficiently to observe, yet not to partake in the malfeasance, and humble enough to evade scrutiny during lapses of judgment. Like a silhouette etched by flame, he glided through the Vatican's concealed precincts, absorbing all while seeming inconsequential. Cardinals entrusted him with ritual protocols, yet overlooked his proximity in moments demanding prudence. This obscurity became his paramount tool by the closing years of the 1492 AD, the Borgia clan's comportment had drawn censure across Europe. Alexander's firstborn, I, had attained the dukedom of Gandia, but his disposition revealed corruption as unwarranted as his ascent. Whispers abounded of his brutality, libidinous indulgences, and ineptitude in the occurrences of the 14th of June, 1497 AD, altered the trajectory irrevocably. Juan's corpse was retrieved from the Tiber's waters, his neck slashed and his form marred by 9 lacerations. The assassination reverberated through Rome, inflicting upon Alexander a sorrow so acute that spectators pondered if heavenly retribution had at last befallen the Borgias. For 3 days and nights, the Pope abstained from nourishment and repose, lamenting in seclusion like a shattered mortal rather than the formidable sovereign who had once cowed monarchs. In his torment, Alexander proclaimed an agenda of ecclesiastical renewal, advocating curbs on courtly extravagance, reorganization of the apostolic chancery, and eradication of simony and clerical concubinage. For an ephemeral juncture, it seemed personal calamity might realize what protracted rebukes had not, a genuine transformation. A panel of cardinals and jurists commenced formulating edicts, yet anguish, like all facets of Alexander's temperament, was transient. Within months, the reformative blueprints were consigned to oblivion, akin to discomforting epistles from adolescents. The pontiff redirected his focus to his remaining heirs, notably Cesare, whose unyielding resolve and merciless drive would. Cesare Borgia exuded a charisma that captivated allies and adversaries alike. Towering in stature, striking in appearance, and endowed with intellect verging on brilliance, he had been groomed for the church in his father's image. Yet his aptitudes resided in belligerence and governance, not divinity. He relinquished his cardinalate in 1498 AD, the inaugural instance of such voluntary Italy's political terrain afforded Cesare prospects that would tax even Machiavelli's ingenuity. The French sovereign, Louis XII, sought papal sanction for marital dissolution, while sundry Italian principalities beckoned conquest by a sufficiently pitiless warlord. Alexander discerned in these junctures an avenue to forge a realm for his progeny, even if it entailed through sieges, eliminations, and diplomatic subterfuge. Cesare forged a territory in central Italy that rendered him among Europe's mightiest. His tactics were so efficacious that Niccolò Machiavelli would immortalize him as the archetype in The Prince, extolling Cesare's fusion of savagery and efficacy in quest of sovereignty. Such triumphs demanded funds that strained even Vatican vaults, prompting Alexander to devise inventive revenue streams. The vending of indulgences, sacred posts, and even cardinalatial dignities systematized in his latter tenure. Affluent lineages could procure clerical births for their scions, effectively acquiring redemption alongside prestige. The sacred college swelled not by virtue but by Rome in this epoch resembled a dominion besieged by its overlords. The Borgias administered the papal states as their private fiefdom, with Alexander as patriarch and Caesare as heir apparent. Lucretia, despite posthumous vindication of her image, was deployed as a matrimonial instrument in pacts. Her union with Giovanni Sforza was dissolved, citing impotence amid shifting alliances, followed by espousal to Alfonso of Bisceglie, who met demise perhaps at Cesare's behest when utility waned. The Vatican suites in these years transformed into arenas for ever more ornate amusements that strained decorum's frontiers, even for Renaissance mores. These assemblies fulfilled manifold roles beyond diversion: exhibitions of pontifical opulence and influence, forums for diplomatic discourse, and crucibles for allegiance among adherents. Cardinals partaking in papal revelries implicated themselves in his foibles, deterring dissent or The fall of 501 AD beheld the Borgias at their zenith of dominion and perchance depravity. Cesare had consummated his subjugation of the Romagna, garnering acclaim from martial pundits continent-wide. Alexander had surmounted sundry crises, including Charles VIII's incursion and feuds with antagonistic aristocracies. The Jubilee of 1500 had lured multitudes of devotees to Rome. Amid this aura of victory and ethical erosion, Cesare Borgia orchestrated what history dubs the banquet of chestnuts. The precise impetus eludes clarity: a festivity, a political tableau, or the inevitable apex of escalating outrage. Sources proffer diverse rationales, yet concur on the core particulars that astounded even jaded scrutinizers of pontifical. The 31st of October 1501 AD, All Hallows' Eve, when the veil betwixt sanctity and sin is deemed most permeable. Whether intentional or fortuitous, The timing imbued the most notorious papal debauchery with profound emblemism, transpiring on a vigil devoted to ancestral spirits. Cesare's Vatican lodgings encompass segments of the papal edifice, adorned lavishly by Pinturicchio early in Alexander's rule. The muralled surfaces portrayed vignettes from mythic antiquity and sacred lore, furnishing a sardonic canvas for occurrences alien to both heritages. These chambers, crafted to flaunt the Borgia pontiff's affluence and erudition, instead hosted an episode The roster of invitees unveiled yet the evening's luminaries were the 50 courtesans Cesare had convened for guest delectation. These were no vulgar streetwalkers but refined companions versed in the subtle craft of gratification, whilst preserving the secrecy potentates demanded. Many boasted prior Vatican soirees. Johann Burchard, in his ceremonial capacity, attended not as reveller but spectator. His duties mandated readiness for ritual exigencies, even in private feats, positioning him ideally to chronicle events others might consign to amnesia. His Latin narrative, penned with forensic dispassion, safeguards minutiae, illuminating both that per Burchard's exacting ledger. The affair commenced unremarkably with supper in Cesare's intimate halls. The repast proffered seasonal delicacies befitting the assemblage's station, paired with vintages from papal vaults matured in subterranean grottos. Dialogue meandered fluidly as the libations, encompassing statecraft, conquests, and the ambience shifted as attendants cleared remnants and unveiled the night's veritable diversion. The courtesans, attired in silks and velvets tailored to accentuate their forms, commenced dances for the convened. Musicians, bound by oaths of silence, supplied cadences fostering progressively intimate gestures. What ensued defied even the expansive tolerances cultivated under Alexander. As Burchard noted with precision, the performers danced initially garbed, but as libations persisted and fervor mounted, vestments were shed incrementally until nudity prevailed. This evolution from decorous amusement to overt exhibition unfolded gradually, allowing acclamation. The banquet's nucleus involved the eponymous chestnuts. Servitors displaced candelabras to the flooring, forging islets of tremulous illumination amid gloom. Chestnuts were dispersed across the expanse, and the unclad courtesans were bid to retrieve them on all fours, their silhouettes aglow in candle flicker as they navigated the contrived labyrinth. Pope Alexander VI, per Burchard's testimony, oversaw from an exalted throne, flanked by Cesare and Lucrezia. The pontiff's daughter's attendance has confounded scholars, complicit in familial rot or ensnared by fate. Accounts diverge, yet affirm her presence as the night crested in abasement. The culminating act featured rivalries among male attendees to couple with the most courtesans. Rewards included silken tunics, footwear, headdresses, and sundry luxuries of substantial worth in an age of artisanal craft. The contests proceeded overtly, with retainers tallying. Burchard's depiction lingered in the Vatican secret. The dawn succeeding the banquet of chestnuts revealed Rome ostensibly unaltered, yet spiritually fractured. Pilgrims persisted in pilgrimages to St. Peter's liturgies, cardinals adhered to agendas, and the Pope materialized for audiences as though unperturbed. However, tidings disseminated via servitors, sentinels, and functionaries who had glimpsed or heard of the papal excess. Reports traversed beyond Rome through ambassadorial dispatches, chronicling astonishment among those deeming themselves inured to papal quirk. The scandal's ramifications transcended personal ethics. Reformers continent-wide, including Girolamo Savonarola in Florence, wielded banquet accounts as proof of papal irremediable decay. Demands for councils to unseat Alexander VI intensified, bolstered by vivid narratives validating diarist Borgia charges. Alexander's riposte was unyielding defiance. Eschewing penitence or rectification, he amplified backing for Cesare's expeditions and perpetuated his lavish existence. If aught, the exposure emancipated him from residual inhibitions, as if scandal's publicity obviated feigned decorum. The banquet of chestnuts materialized near Alexander's papacy's terminus, yet not as aberration but apotheosis of incremental corruption that had warped the papal entourage beyond medieval forebears' recognition. The divine and earthly had fused so inextricably that demarcation demanded unwelcomed exertion. Cesare's trajectory prospered post-scandal, intimating moral indignation scarcely swayed Renaissance realpolitik. His conquests elicited commendation from efficacy admirers, heedless of character. Machiavelli's dissection of Cesare's stratagems decoupled governance prowess from virtue, positing victors must wield any expedient for objectives. Yet, triumphs on such bases proved ephemeral. Alexander VI perished the 18th of August 1503 AD, perhaps malaria, amid poisoning whispers mirroring his reign's paranoia and brutality. His demise precipitated swift repercussions for his progeny. Cesare's alliances dissolved sans papal shield, culminating in his 1507 AD demise as a hireling warrior in Spain. Lucrezia endured as Ferrara's duchess, yet her maturity was eclipsed by youthful infamies and familial notoriety. Successor Pope Julius II shunned the Borgia suites of the banquet's venue, relocating upward to chambers he entrusted to Raphael for adornment with frescoes now Vatican treasures. This spatial shift emblemized a wider endeavor to sever the papacy from Alexander's ethical lapses, though reputational mending proved arduous. Historiographic appraisals of the banquet have fluctuated with era's ethical and political milieus. 19th and early 20th century Catholic scholars contested Burchard's veracity, suggesting a dependable observer could not chronicle such extremities or that forgeries tainted the manuscript. Protestant contemporary scholars largely endorse Burchard's fund. The banquet's architectural milieu imparts further irony. Pinturicchio's frescoes of mythic and sacred motifs oversaw proceedings scandalizing both pagan and pious ethos, juxtaposing idealized art with star. Vatican excavations disclose suite configurations facilitating such seclusion. Interlinked chambers via passages permitted ceremonial grandeur and confidential revelry. Acoustic insulation ensured discretion, enabling Alexander's escalating audacities. Burchard's journal's archival retention prompts inquiries into the Church's historical rapport. Centuries sealed, accessible solely via papal fiat, this duality acknowledges documentary value alongside content chagrin. Ancillary period accounts corroborate Burchard's essence. Diplomatic missives allude to papal fetes straining norms, though scant match his explicitness. Source convergence bolsters the banquet's historicity. The scandal's imprint on papal annals transcends proximate politics. Alexander VI's culminative excesses armed Protestant reformers, asserting papal rot. Martin Luther's authority assaults drew credence from hierarchic moral exemplars. The mid-16th century Counter-Reformation partly countered such scandals. Trent's clerical rigor and seminary mandates redressed ills dramatized by Alexander's tenure. Yet, reform exacted beyond policy. Post. Trent papal rites Baroque grandeur sought dignity restoration via spectacle and protocol, supplanting Alexander's impromptu fetes with orchestrated solemnity to avert scandal. Participants' and witnesses' psychic toll defies distant appraisal. For courtesans, the night likely signified vocational duty over debasement, their status rendering it economic imperative. For clerics, it might denote complicity or coerced acquiescence under reprisal threat. Roman laity's reaction to papal awareness unveils faith authority intricacies. Despite cognizance of Alexander's flaws, pilgrims thronged, rites persisted, sacraments endured, indicating theological nuance, distinguishing officials' merit from ritual efficacy. The banquet of chestnuts transcends mere papal Thus, the 31st of October 1501 AD marks a papal history pivot, spiritual, temporal tensions crisis, compelling successors to elect between worldly pomp and ethical integrity, a dilemma molding Catholic evolution centuries hence. Gazing back over 5 centuries to that flame-lit Vatican Eve, we discern echoes of humanity's perennial contest between lofty ideals and base urges. The chestnuts strewn upon papal marbles, modest orbs symbolizing dignity's plunge, sans moral tether. In a realm where such dichotomies persist, with spiritual guides occasionally faltering, and authority corrupting the consecrated, the banquet endures as historical outrage and timeless admonition. The flames that lit that infamous night have extinguished, participants reduced to Roman sepulchral dust, and the chambers now exhibit masterpieces to awed visitors. Yet Burchard's measured Latin enshrines when sanctity and sin merged utterly, when Christ's deputy mirrored Rome's most licentious Caesars, and floor-scattered chestnuts attested. Ultimately, Alexander VI's prescribed revelry's essence lies not in singular ethical collapse, but as a speculum mirroring humanity's dual potential for elevation and descent. The architects of ethereal basilicas and divine artistry also convened in papal halls for displays eroding spiritual bedrock. Those Vatican chestnuts were collected pre-dawn, but the inquiries they evoke on authority, devotion, and essence persist strewn across history's expanse, beckoning each age to reckon with the inheritance of the most infamous pope to wield heaven's keys.